And Coulter joins us now in her first television interview since making those comments, and also joining us is former Democratic pollster and Fox News contributor Pat Goodell. Welcome to both of you. And, you know, your problem isn't with liberals like me, because I was never your audience, but I'm getting a lot of emails from conservatives like this one that says, I'm a conservative, used to be a fan of hers, meaning yours. You're an embarrassment, this person says, to conservative beliefs, to the Republican Party, and to anyone with a shred of self-respect. Do us a favor, shun her. What do you say to conservatives who respond to you now like that?
That's how all liberals begin letters denouncing conservatives. I've pointed it out many times. And, I mean, this is the same thing we go through every 6 months. I say something, the same people become hysterical, and that's the end of it. I mean, I think the lesson young right-wingers ought to draw from this is it's really not that scary to attack liberals. This is about my 17th allegedly career-ending moment. And by the way, also, again, the left has precisely proved the point of the joke, which was to make fun of that actor going into rehab for using a word. This is like the Soviet Union, where if you disagree with the government, you go into a mental institution. Which is that you are attacking this letter writer for being a liberal. I'm getting a lot of these letters from conservatives. You're losing your conservative base by saying the things you're saying. Well, okay, we'll see. That's what has happened every other time for about a decade now. You continue to say, I get the same thing. Your answer is, okay, it was a joke. Would you make a racial slur and just say it was a joke? No, that's preposterous, and I think it's offensive that, you know, you immediately, whenever you have to go to the argument, oh, would you use the N-word? I mean, that is part of this semantic totalitarianism, to compare everything to the N-word. No, if you weren't brought here as slaves, and you weren't legally discriminated against. You hear this when people say, you know, we can't use the word illegal alien because that's like using the N-word. No, those are words that are specifically used to demean a particular race. The word I used has nothing to do with sexual preference. It is a schoolyard taunt, and unless you're going to announce here on national TV that John Edwards, married father of many children, is gay, it clearly had nothing to do with that. It's a schoolyard taunt. You're tap dancing around my question. I asked you a very simple question. I didn't ask about the N-word. I simply said, you write this off and say, oh, it was only a joke. And I just said why I wouldn't. You used a word that's very offensive to gays. Would you use a word offensive to another group of people and say, oh, it was only a joke? Where do you draw the line? It isn't offensive to gays. It has nothing to do with gays. It's a schoolyard taunt, meaning wuss. And unless you're telling me that John Edwards is gay, it was not applied to a gay person. Was Isaiah Washington wrong to use that word when he used it to describe T.R. Knight? Yes, he used it incorrectly, but I still don't think he should go to rehab for using a word. I think that's crazy. I think all of America outside of Hollywood thinks that's a wee bit crazy. So he used it incorrectly, but you used it correctly? Yes, yes. I would say that of pretty much every Democratic politician. It could have been John Dean, but he's not running for president. It could have been a different word, but that's not the word that Isaiah Washington went to rehab for, which is what it was a joke about. Pat Goodell, let's have you weigh in here. You want to respond to what you've heard so far? Well, look, I love Ann. I do think that in terms of that particular, I saw the clip. I mean, I can see why she thought it was a joke. I can see why other people did not and why they would have made the reference point. But sometimes people have a hard time with Ann's humor. But it got very tough. I thought the Republican candidates were quick to jump. And but I liked best was the Edwards campaign commented as though Ann were the right wing of the entire nation forcing down upon their campaign. It was very funny. They were raising money with it. So at least you raise money for them, Ann. Hey, but I'm sure it won't hurt you in your book sales either. People take all this stuff far too seriously. Let me go to Ann here for a second here, because I actually went and looked at your whole speech. I've been to Ann Coulter's serious speeches. I've watched you debate. We've shown this. This was meant to be on every level, because I went through, this was a speech that was a series of joke after joke after joke after joke, wasn't it? Yes, I thought you were going to show some of them. Well, I actually am, but I want to first show, you were asked to comment about the gay lifestyle. It just so happens in this very speech. I want to roll that tape. Well, I'm not anti-gay. We're against gay marriage. I don't want gays to be discriminated against, or, I mean, I think we have, in addition to blacks, I don't know why all gays aren't Republicans, I think we have the pro-gay position, which is anti-crime and for tax cuts.
That was in the very same speech. What do you say to those people that take the word that you used and say, well, that was an anti-gay slur? What do you say to them?
Right, and by the way, no one had accused me of being anti-gay in that speech. The joke I had told about rehab for using a certain word had gotten a lot of laughs. What I was saying right there was for conservatives to not let the mainstream media describe us as anti-gay and opposing Mitt Romney's policies for being pro-gay. I said, we're not anti-gay, we are pro-gay. And it had nothing, obviously nothing to do with the controversy over the joke, because there was no controversy over the joke.
Well, I think there's a lot of selective moral outrage. I mean, you know, Dick Durbin compares our troops to Nazis. He's a senator. He can have an impact on the troops and their future. You have Howard Dean. You know, Republicans are dark, evil, brain dead. They can't get African Americans in a room unless the waitstaff is there. You know, we have the former Klansman who's the head of the Democrats. And is this selective moral outrage, and they're trying to use you now as a fundraiser?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It happens every 6 months, and you're always there to put me on TV, Sean. And somehow it's not driven that conservative base away. No, and by the way, the examples you're talking about weren't even intended as jokes. I mean, Alan can say, oh, well, that wasn't funny. Well, okay, the audience of 7,000 people thought it was funny. It was intended as a joke. Even if you think it was a joke that didn't work, it was a joke. What Sean is talking about here aren't even intended jokes.
What names have you been called over the years?
Well, that'll fill up the rest of the show.
Quite a few, I would assume.
Well, you should hear mine.
Well,
you know what they call me.
Let me just say this, Pat. Look, I understand there are certain words, and look, you're smart, you're bright, you're intelligent, you're a servant. You know, if you use that word, that there are going to be people that melt like Alka-Seltzer in water. But you know that. I mean, this is not...
Right, but, Sean, I think the point is two things. I didn't choose that word. That was the word from the PC police. That's what Isaiah Washington of Grey's Anatomy went into rehab for. That was a big story.
But you got to explain this. For Isaiah, I think it's what last name is, Washington.
No, the confusion
he said this about a fellow actor on the show, and then after he said it, the people that he worked with at ABC got so mad, so he went into rehab because he said the word, and that's what the joke was about.
Right.
Well, except the problem was no one understood the context of John Edwards, and that was...
Well, in the speech you would have, Pat. I mean, you don't the way the mainstream media is just going to play this one thing over and over again, but in the speech I've just gone through a bunch of jokes on Gore, a bunch of jokes on Hillary, a bunch of jokes on Obama. Frankly, I didn't think Edwards was really worth attacking, and I promise you, an audience of conservative news junkies not only know the Isaiah Washington story, they know John Edwards with his Two Americas and you know, his charlatan performances before illiterate juries. They know that that is wussy, that is lame, that is a sissy thing to do. Everybody knows what I was talking about, and they also know that John Edwards is not gay, and that I was using it in the schoolyard taunt way. In that way, it is a sophomoric word. It is not a bad word.
Sophomoric joke, and unfortunately for you. But we'll pick up the debate.
No, sophomoric word, not a sophomoric joke. It was an excellent joke.
Wasn't that funny? Yeah, it would have been better if it was